Earth 2182 used to be quite similar to Earth 616, but when major events such as Wolverine killing Charles Xavier under the influence of the Shadow King happened, the future of this Earth took a rather different course. Out of all the good and bad aspects of this alternate universe, one of the most remarkable achievements happens to be Armageddon, the son of Jean and Apocalypse. This golden metallic giant, sporting a bright blonde mohawk, definitely caught the eyes of fans when he was introduced in the first issue of X-Men, Millennial Vision, published in 2000. In today's video, let's get together and learn a bit more about Armageddon, the terrorist who became a superhero. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Genesis of Destruction, the origins of Armageddon. Apocalypse is one of the strongest villains that the X-Men ever had to face off against, and rightfully so. His powers are far beyond what we can explain with words. He has always posed a tremendous threat, and every time we think that this will be the last time we get to see Apocalypse, he returns in his full glory. The Apocalypse had always had one goal, that of absolute world dominance. This goal could very well be achieved by him on his own, or so he thought. When the X-Men repeatedly posed a problem in his path to glory, Apocalypse decided to get more manpower. Instead of, recruiting soldiers for himself, he also indulged in making babies, powerful ones at that, who he could control. Holocaust, the one who happens to be one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, is one of his powerful sons. It is the same for Strife, the clone of Cable. But there is one son who is far more powerful than these two, and that one is Armageddon. Armageddon was not conceived naturally by Apocalypse and Jean Grey. Instead, Armageddon was actually created by the Apocalypse. He took his own DNA material and mixed it with Jean's to create his son Armageddon. He chose Jean as the mother of the child owing to her close relationship with Phoenix. We know that the Phoenix Force happens to be the one thing in this whole universe that can take down the Apocalypse. If Armageddon ended up becoming the host of the Phoenix Force owing to the genes he shared with his mother, and then continued to remain under his father's control, then Apocalypse would be unstoppable. This was the game plan when Apocalypse created Armageddon, but sadly, Armageddon refused his father's ways and followed his mother's footsteps instead. Father versus son. Armageddon happens to be a spitting image of his father, Apocalypse. The only differences between the father and the son happen to be the son's golden-colored skin and bright blonde mohawk. So, with an equally powerful forte, you can imagine that if the father and the son went up against one another, the fight that would follow would be quite memorable. Well, that is exactly what Jim Calafiore gave us in the 41st issue of The Exile. While it is true that the father versus son trope is frankly overdone in comics and media alike, when it comes to this iteration within the story, there are various nuances that make it a pleasant spectacle. The writer created this amazing alternate timeline where life on Earth was vastly different from what we are used to. In this Earth, known as Earth 2182, after Wolverine was possessed by the Shadow King to kill Xavier, things changed for the whole of the mutant kind. This murder resulted in a huge psychic blast, which paralyzed Logan for good. In this world, Jean Grey did pass away, and Cyclops could not bear the death of his beloved. He ended up becoming more unstable than before and formed a new brotherhood of mutants. So, with Jean and Cyclops out of the equation, it was Logan and Kurt, popularly known as Nightcrawler, who took up the reins of X-Men. The team consisted of Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, Thunderbird, Armageddon, and Nocturne, who happens to be the love child of Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch. Now, out of this whole group, one of the members stands out the most. That is Armageddon himself. If you really had to draw parallels with Earth 616, you could call Armageddon the Nahan Summers of Earth 2182. While he was created by his father to do the latter's bidding, Armageddon revolted and joined the X-Men instead. In the 41st issue, the comic starts with Armageddon and Apocalypse entangled in a huge fight. Why, you might ask? Well, that is because the Apocalypse is back, trying to take over this world. He showed up with the device known as the Chronal Disruptor. He wanted to demolish the Earth as we know it, and Armageddon was not going to let that happen. While Armageddon's powers of telekinesis are on par with his mother's, they are not quite enough to defeat his father. So soon enough, we see Apocalypse get out of the wrestling match he was locked in with his son with a swift uppercut. But Armageddon quickly got back up on his feet and started fighting with his father to keep him distracted from Kitty Pryde, who was trying to destroy the machine. But Apocalypse soon felt her presence there, and this led to him trying to power out Kitty Pryde. This is when the Phoenix Force, who was now a part of the X-Men team using the hollow shell of Colossus, decided to pull through. The Phoenix burned through the apocalypse and destroyed him and his machine. In this explosion, people lost all contact with Kitty. The whole team was scurrying around to look for Kitty, and Armageddon, bless his heart, was like, "I am happy to help, but what exactly are we looking for?" while throwing boulders over his shoulder. They did find Kitty at last, and now that Apocalypse's shields were down, the mutants did not dilly-dally to get caught by the cops. They took their fallen comrade and bounced from the place as soon as possible. As everyone recuperated at the Xavier Institute for Gifted Children, we learned from the news channel exactly how mutants are being portrayed. The heroic team was now called an Outlaw Mutant Team and was responsible for demolishing half of the city. Big yikes if you ask me. We learned that Kitty got time displaced, thanks to the Chrono Disruptor, and the Kitty Pryde, who was now walking the halls of the Institute, was a younger version of her. While everyone was busy with the time-displaced Kitty, the flaming PR of Scott Summers, who just made a daring escape with his Brotherhood and Apocalypse, Armageddon, was struggling to adjust. He had just joined the X-Men team, and Kurt was only able to give him temporary quarters. However, the room was far too small for Armageddon. He was feeling out of place. He did not quite know how he was meant to feel, because he had just betrayed his father, and now, sure, he was a part of the X-Men team, but was he ever going to fit in there? Scott made a beeline to the Institute, and as you can imagine, chaos unfolded within the school premises. Even though Getty was not quite sure if he fit in with the mutants here, who all seemed like a big family, Armageddon did not hold back his punches. He knew he did not quite fit in, but he was for sure not going to let anyone take away whatever semblance of a safe space he had. He fought with the radioactive man, one of Scott's Brotherhood members, pretty valiantly while throwing one-liners at him. But once Armageddon breached the radioactive man's containment suit, the radiation that emitted from the villain was enough to knock him out for good. Nocturne, who managed to dodge all the attacks thrown her way, noticed that Scott was really here to kill Logan. Scott blames Logan for all the misery he had caused by killing Charles Xavier, even though it is not actually the case. Logan had been going through his own version of penance, as the Phoenix had pointed out before, but Scott did not know that. He was about to kill Logan when Nocturne possessed Armageddon and used his powers to reanimate Logan's arm, ending the war between Cyclops and Logan for now. While Armageddon is not present for a lot of the issues, whenever he does show up, he is a powerhouse. He is a good guy, and the way the writers have showcased his character, you are sure to be amazed at how his persona from a villainous origin went through the most believable and perfectly explainable character arc. Every time he shows up in the panels, you do not think of him as the force of evil. You genuinely look at Getty and understand that this boy is trying to navigate his way through life, trying to be a better person than whatever was expected of him. He is subverting all the expectations people had of him in the best possible ways. If that is not an admirable character, then I honestly do not know who would be. How powerful is Armageddon? As the hybrid son of Jean Grey and Apocalypse, Getty has quite the roster of powers when you look at it. So, let me go through the most important ones. Armageddon has something known as self-atomic manipulation. As the name suggests, he can control the atoms of his own body. He can alter them to his will, which gives him endurance that is unheard of. Whenever he is in an adverse environment, Armageddon manages to adjust his molecular structure to fit his survival the best. He elongates himself and changes his arms into machinery, if there is any need for it. That is why you never have to see Armageddon carrying a bunch of weapons. He can turn his body into a weapon just like that. His fists can turn into axes, tentacle, and even plasma cannon, if there is any need for them. Not only that, but if his arms get separated from him, he can simply reattach them to himself owing to his power. As you all have noticed, Armageddon looks like he has this metal armor around him. This metal armor is created by techno-organic cells. These cells are extremely durable, because even when the radioactive man blasted him away, there were not a lot of scratches left on him, just like his father. Armageddon should be able to regenerate himself with a tiny drop of blood, but as we saw in the comics, if the damage dealt is too much for him, he gets knocked out of commission for a while. While it is not quite confirmed based on the panels of the comics, I think Armageddon also happens to have his father's ability to alter his size at will. He can assimilate mass and get rid of it based on whatever would suit him the best at the moment. Now, we all know that Sabah has this freaky but super cool power known as self-power bestowal. Based on all the limited appearances that we see of Armageddon throughout the comic book issues, it can be confirmed that he too has that power. This is obviously because Armageddon can simply change the celestial technology in his body, as well as the cellular components of his organic cells. That way, he can simply access the mutant gene and add more mutations to it, giving him even more superpowers on on the fly, giving him even more superpowers on the fly. He also has commendable super strength. We know Apocalypse can increase his superpower by absorbing the energy that surrounds him. Based on how Armageddon can go toe-to-toe with his father, we can say without a shadow of a doubt that he too shares that same physical prowess. But these are all the things that Getty got from his dad. He surely got something from his mom. He has his mother's telekinetic ability, which is shown to help him out quite a bit, especially when he is in a tough spot in the middle of the fight. Other than that, Armageddon also has telepathic ability, which allow him to communicate with people without opening his mouth. While it is true that we never see Armageddon using these powers to pry into someone's mind and mess around with it like we have seen several other telepaths do over the years, I have to say that it is good to know that he has these abilities handy. He uses the psionic links that he can form to understand just how powerful his opponents are. Based on that, he is shown manipulating his own powers in order to go up against them. When Armageddon and Apocalypse were fighting, Apocalypse complimented Armageddon on his mental fortitude, so it is clear that Armageddon was not just matching his father's attacks on a physical level, but also on a mental level. Even though Armageddon lost this fight because he was not strong enough, I am sure that with a little bit of training, he would be able to best his father easily. After all, someone like our boy Armageddon, who was a nigh omnipotent parentage from which to draw his own abilities, once left to time, would surely master both aspects of the abilities that he inherited owing to his lineage. While it is true that the powers from his mother's side, namely that of telekinesis, were not quite enough for him to overpower his father, he does have all his old man's abilities at his disposal, which puts him on par with him at the very least. So, if you had to imagine a version of a fully matured Armageddon, he would surely be a superior version of his father. Marvelous verdict. Armageddon is a character that truly showcases all the strong points of a Marvel comic. His whole existence was created just to prove how vast the Marvel Comics universe is, and what the various possibilities are that can or might happen to turn into reality. He, as a character, is an absolute sweetheart, and no one can change my mind about that. When you see him struggle to fit in with the group, awkwardly standing in the middle of his temporary quarters, not sure how to adjust, and awkwardly brushing away Kurt's good wishes, he becomes extremely relatable in my eyes. He struggles to get it in, but when he does, he protects the team like they are all the family that he has ever known, and his awkward phase with them seems almost like a dream. The way he goes from a tool in the hands of a villain to a well-appreciated and loved superhero honestly makes me feel extremely happy for him, and I cannot wait to see more of the man in the future. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.